Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Education for Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. I would like to start out by reminding everyone that this meeting will be live streamed. As per policy number 7, regular and special meetings of the board may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board reserves at its sole discretion, via motion at any meeting, the right to not stream live or archive a meeting or a portion of a meeting. Further, the board reserves the right to edit any recorded portion of a meeting. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education, the Langley Board of Education, at 7:03 p.m. I would like to first acknowledge that the Langley School District is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. We gather here tonight in an understanding of the importance of Yayistul, Skekayais working together, and Nutsamut, Letsamut, uniting ourselves with one mind, one heart, to ensure that we support and inspire all learners to reach their full potential. I'd like to begin the evening as well by introducing those that are present in the room, from trustees as well as staff and partner groups. First of all, starting on my far left, Trustee Ward, and then next Trustee Rye, and then at the far right we have Trustee Wilson, and oh my goodness, I'm I've been having this thing with names today. You did for sure, and Trustee Neufeld, my apologies. And then with our staff present, we have Superintendent Mel Gill, Secretary Treasurer Brian Isley. We have Deputy Superintendent Woody Bradford, Assistant Superintendent Lisa Lanchbury, Assistant Superintendent Marcello Moino, Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shind Chand, Communications Manager Joanne Abshire, Executive Assistant Debbie Jones, Technical Support Specialist Paul Baboa, Technical Support Specialist Vincent Montefrio, District Principal of Human Resources Kevin Reeve, Director of Instruction Learning Support Services George Koslovic, and from our partner groups, here as President of QP 1260, we have Taylor Holoboff. Vice President 1260, QP 1260, we have Jesse Calger. From LTA, President Tanya Kerr. LP VPA, Vice President Sean Davids. President of DPAC, Alicia Rempel. DPAC Vice President Brian Martins. QP 1851 President Alva Morrison. My apologies if I pronounced any of your names incorrectly. Please let me know if I did so that I correct it for next time. So before we begin the business portion of our meeting, I would like to say a few words. Wait a minute. The Langley Board of Education would like to acknowledge the tragic news from the Shishelt First Nation with respect to the identification of 40 unmarked children's graves at the former site of the St. Augustine's Residential School in Shishelt. This is yet another upsetting announcement in an ongoing process around unearthing the truth of the residential school system in Canada. At this time, we will observe a minute of silence to honor those who suffered trauma and harm at former residential school sites, those who did not return, as well as recognize the families and communities who are mourning. We'll take a minute of silence now. Thank you. Great. First item we have is a report from in camera. I will do that report. At our in-camera meeting, we discussed property. So trustees, you have the consent agenda in front of you. Do I have a mover that the Board of Education adopts the consent agenda as presented? Moved by trustee Neufeld, seconded by trustee Rye. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And first on the agenda, we have, we have the consideration of the agenda next, before we move on to delegations. The agenda in front of you, is there a mover for the agenda? And just a quick note that, oh, actually, we can note it later. Sorry about the date. There was a mistake in the date, but we can talk about that with the motion later. But agenda items remain the same. So is there a mover to make the motion for the agenda? Okay, seconded by trustee Wilson, seconded by trustee Ward. And any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Great. First up on the agenda is delegations. Now, do I see Wendy here? Yeah. Oh, you are there. I didn't see you. So I would like to welcome Wendy Cook, who is here on behalf of the New Westminster and District Labour Council, presenting on the day of mourning for workers killed and injured.
Thank you. So good evening, and my name is Wendy Cook, and I'm a delegate of the New Westminster and District Labour Council and a member of, obviously, the BCTF Union. I'm also the BCTF rep on the New West District Labour Council executive, so asked to come and speak. Each year, the New Westminster and District Labour Council presents to the 14 city councils and 7 school boards within our region to seek their support and recognition of April 28th as the day of mourning for workers killed and injured on the job. Our presentations are designed to be informative, as we believe workplace health and safety is everyone's responsibility. This year, workers across Canada are sharing that it is important to know your rights, use the tools, and defend our wins. In 2021, over 1,000 people in Canada died as a result of their work. Too many families lose loved ones to occupational diseases. And we know those numbers are just the tip of the iceberg because they include only those fatalities accepted by the workers' compensation system. In cases of workplace exposure to toxic chemicals or materials like asbestos, effects only become apparent months, years, or decades later. On September 22nd, 2022, the BC Labour Heritage Centre officially dedicated the first public asbestos memorial in North America to honor the thousands of victims who have died or been impacted by asbestos exposure. Labor leaders, government leaders, workers, family, and friends gathered for the unveiling of Magic and Lethal, a metal artwork that is activated by the wind and evokes a visual connection to the lungs and bronchial airways of the human body. If you visit the seawall by the Vancouver Convention Centre, you can see the memorial in the place where workers without protective personal equipment loaded asbestos into ships for export for decades. Workers aren't disposable, and that is why memorials like Magic and Lethal are important and why we say we fight for the living. We owe it to the families who have lost their loved ones to preventable workplace fatalities, injuries, and illnesses to do better for today's workers. Know your rights. There is no better prevention measure than a well-trained, empowered health and safety committee. Workers armed with robust training are the backbone of our health and safety system. Education is key, and this is especially true for our young workers who may not know their rights or may not feel able to speak up. While the average age of injured workers in BC in 2021 was 42 years, WorkSafe statistics show that young people are seriously injured at some of the highest rates of all workers, and these injuries can impact young workers for the rest of their lives. Use the tools refers to legislation, regulation, education, equipment, and more. But the most powerful health and safety tool is knowledge. Education and information empowers all workers to stand up for their rights at work. Investing in proactive prevention measures will ensure workers can return home to their loved ones at the end of the day and live their lives free from work-related illnesses and injuries. Accountability is critical when it comes to health and safety at work. As workers, we hold each other accountable, reporting issues and dangers as soon as they arise, and actively participating in joint health and safety committees. We call on employers to invest in meaningful prevention measures, offer robust ongoing training, identifying workplace hazards, and develop an action plan for addressing them, and ensure worker participation in developing and monitoring the systems that will make workplaces safer. Governments are also accountable and have a role to play in ensuring health and safety in our workplaces. We call on federal and provincial governments to hire and train more health and safety officers and inspectors, enforce the laws we have, including legislated occupational health and safety requirements and the West Ray Law, and include mental health as a specific component of occupational health and safety in the Canada Labour Code. Here in BC, unions have made hard-fought gains in ensuring appropriate WorkSafe BC coverage. For example, in 2018, the provincial government introduced presumptive coverage for mental health disorders, and in 2019, coverage was expanded to include more categories of work. Under the presumptive clause, when a worker from an eligible occupation, such as a first responder, receives a formal diagnosis of PTSD or another mental disorder as a result of a work-related traumatic event or events, it is easier to advance a workers' compensation claim. Presumptive coverage for firefighters has also been expanded to include 20 occupational diseases, including the addition of ovarian and cervical cancers, an important milestone for equity in workplace health and safety. When we say defend our wins, we are referring to improvements like those I just mentioned that workers have gained over long years of lobbying all levels of government and sharing heartbreaking stories of preventable loss, trauma, and suffering. When it comes to workplace health and safety, we cannot take any backward steps. Workplace injuries and illnesses and fatalities are preventable and must never be seen as just part of the job. Finally, last year we shared with you the Canadian Labour Congress campaign, Work Shouldn't Hurt. That called on federal government to take a leadership role internationally by ratifying the International Labour Organization, ILO Convention 190, which aims to eliminate violence and harassment at work. I'm pleased to report that this was passed, and in early early this year in Canada, we became the 25th country in the world to ratify this convention, which provides a common framework for action and a unique opportunity to shape a future of work based on social justice. I'd like to conclude by inviting you to join our Labor Council this day of mourning for workers killed and injured on the job on Friday, April 28th at 11 a.m. in Westminster, New Westminster Pier Park, New Westminster. Links to the event are on the Labor Council website and Facebook pages. Everyone here can help us make a difference, be safety conscious, support accountability measures, and health and safety education in our workplaces. And I don't want to take away from the minute silence that you started with. So you can do a minute of silence on the 28th or your next meeting, because I think the way you started today was very impactful. Thank you for that. And respectfully, from the New West District Labor Council, the Canadian Labour Congress, and the BC Federation of Labor. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. We had discussed this, and we've planned to also do a minute of silence. But definitely felt it was important at the beginning of the meeting as well, for sure. So in honor of workers who have lost their lives, suffered injury or illness from their jobs, or experienced a work-related tragedy, I would like to ask trustees, staff, partner groups, and guests to observe a moment of silence at this time. Thank you. All right, moving along the agenda to the superintendent's reports. 7.1, the IDEA Summit and IDEA X Challenge 2023. I will pass this along to Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Ashdown. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce our Director of Instruction, George Kozlovic, who's going to be presenting on the IDEA Summit and IDEA X Challenge 2023. We've had a bit of a rough go with both these events due to COVID, and we've had to interrupt an amazing event for kids when it comes to entrepreneurship and working at problem-solving real-world problems. And we're excited to see this event alive and well again. And I'll ask George to please present this evening. Thank you, George.
Thanks, Mal. So good evening. As Mal said, I'm George Kozlovic. I'm the Director of Instruction, and I'm really excited to be here tonight to tell all of you about IDEA Summit and the IDEA X Challenge. And as Mal mentioned, it's a great event for our students, for our staff, and also for our community across Langley. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it as we go. So as Mal mentioned, our first IDEA, this will actually be our third IDEA Summit. Our first IDEA Summit we held back in 2018. We did it again in 2019, and then for the last 3 years, unfortunately, we have not been able to do it due to COVID. So this is the first time we're able to bring the IDEA Summit back, and we're thrilled to be able to bring this event back. It's a huge event and a great event for our students and our entire school district. So as you can see, IDEA stands for Innovation, Design, entrepreneurship, and altruism. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background to give you a bit of an idea of where the Idea Summit actually came from. So the whole idea behind the Idea Summit actually started way back in 2016. So a couple of years before the first summit was actually held, and it was sort of started by our then superintendent, Gord Stewart. And what Gord wanted, he wanted to create opportunities for students to develop their entrepreneurial mindsets, that entrepreneurial spirit, which we know is so important for young people as they move into adulthood. And so he actually pulled together a think tank of educators, admin, teachers, students, community members. And a result of that work of that group is they put together a plan to bring entrepreneurship alive into the Langley School District by bringing in some programs such as Power Play for young entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurship, and all of a sudden we launched a number of programs throughout our schools to get this movement towards entrepreneurship kickstarted. And along the way, the think tank also thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a huge showcase at the end of the school year that actually showcased all of the work that those students did? And that's how the Idea Summit was born. And as I mentioned, the first one was actually held in May 2018. So how do we get to Idea Summit? Well, the way it works is that each school, or many of our schools, not every single one, but a lot of our schools, elementary and middle, will host a school-based entrepreneurship fair. So the students learn about entrepreneurship in their school. It ends in a large entrepreneur fair that they host in their school on a particular day. And some of the photos you see up here, these are some examples from this year's entrepreneurship fair, which was held at Lynn Fripps a few months, I guess back, it would have been just before or just after spring break. They're usually for grades 4 to 8. And as you can see, the quote on the side there is actually from one of the teachers who runs the fair at Lynn Fripps, Jennifer Fernandez. And one of the things she highlights is that throughout the project, students learn and apply essential critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, creativity, and innovation skills. And you can see that by some of the ideas that are reflected there in the photos. Students have to approach this with a project-based learning model. They have to develop a business plan. They have to design their projects. They do a market test, and then they showcase it. And the other neat part is sort of the altruism piece, is that all students donate a portion of the products that they sell, a portion of their proceeds go to charity. So they choose a charity, or the school chooses a charity, and that money goes back towards that particular charity. And as I mentioned, in a lot of schools, we use a program called Power Play from Young Entrepreneurs. It's a program that's available to our schools. Teachers go to workshops, they learn how to run the program and how to run the entrepreneurship, and then they bring that into their classroom. They're provided with resources and support to do that. And we've been using that program over the last number of years, but we're now at the point where we've developed enough capacity in the district that we're actually developing our own sort of in-house program that's going to allow this to continue and spread throughout some of our schools. And in doing so, it's also really incorporating all of the aspects of the actual curriculum. So ADST, which is Applied Design Skills Technology. So some of those things like the explorations that they get to do in their schools, careers, language arts, numeracy. It's all embedded in the work that they're doing. And so we'll continue that with a more district-led program over the next few years. The other really cool thing about the program, as you can see from this particular picture, which I'll talk about, and it's mentioned on the last slide, the other thing that Jennifer says in her quote is that the Young Entrepreneurs Project is an inclusive and engaging learning experience, and it has a significant positive impact on all students and families and the school community. And the neat part about it is there's a place for all students to participate in this. So the picture that you see there, these students are from Lynn Fripps. They're actually fairly new students who have joined us from Ukraine. And so they made as their project, their product, they made Ukrainian style bracelets and then donated all of their proceeds to the Ukrainian Refugee Relief Fund. These students have very little English, yet they were able to participate in the program and be part of this. And they were able to communicate really well with all of their customers at the fair. And if you come to the Idea Summit, these students will be represented at the Idea Summit with their projects. So that's an example of the inclusivity of the project. A couple other examples here. The young student on the top left, she's her language, she's English is her second language. So again, working through that, she actually worked with her grandma, had her grandma teach her how to crochet. And that's the product that she actually created. And again, you'll get to see her at the Idea Summit. And the young lady in the bottom right, she basically used 100% recycled materials for all of her project. And her dad works with copper. And so she actually had him help her work with the copper wire in order to create her project. So those are just some simple examples of the type of things that students are doing. And again, providing that opportunity for all students to participate. So what ends up happening is the students run their fair, the school runs their fair, and then there's a selection process where students from all of the different schools are selected then to go to the Idea Summit. And I'll talk in a little bit about what that actually looks like. This is a really short, like 17-second video, but I thought it was kind of cool because this was the actual Lynn Fripps Elementary Entrepreneurship Fair. It was a 3-hour event. And what we did is we ran a time-lapse photography camera on it. So that's what it was. It just gives you a sense of the number of people from the community that actually attended that, parents, teachers, etc. You see that little gap in there where there's nobody in there. That was the recess break. Kids went out for recess and they came back. So that's why that was there, in case you're wondering. But kind of shows you the cool part about the entrepreneurship fair. So that leads us to the Idea Summit. The Idea Summit is happening on Tuesday, May 9th. Trustees, you should have received an invite in your trustees package on Friday. Hope you can make it out to take a look at it. So the way it works, there's kind of two aspects of the Idea Summit. So the first part is the market showcase and the Idea X, and I'll talk a little bit about Idea X in a minute. So the market showcase is those students that you saw there from Lynn Fripps and all the other students from the other schools that are participating. We'll have about 50 students from grades 4 to 8 who will have tables set up. They'll have their products available for purchase. And then we bus in students from all of the other schools that sign up. So over the course of the day, we have right now signed up about 2,250 students, teachers, support staff, who will be coming into the Idea Summit. They'll get an opportunity during one of those waves to wander around, check out the different products, purchase products if they want. So all the kids come with their money and they're excited to buy things. Again, at the end of the day, the students who are selling, part of their proceeds go to charity. The other piece that we have as part of that showcase is that we also have Idea Summit mentors. So these are community members, some of our donors. So what they'll do is they'll come in during the day and they will actually meet and they'll go around and talk to the different students. So the mentors are assigned a certain number of tables. They will go around and have conversations. They'll talk to the showcasers, talk to them about where they got their inspiration from, where they got their passion from, and they'll give them feedback on, so these are business people from our community, so they're giving them feedback on what they're seeing and things they can do to improve that. We also have about 27 secondary students who are divided into teams of 9 teams of 3, so they're from a secondary school. They've also developed products, so they'll be there showcasing their products and ideas from some of our older students. And then we also have our Idea X Challenge students who will be showcasing their solutions to their problem, which I'll just touch on towards the end. And then at the end part of the day, after the showcase, we go into pitch challenges. So some students have chosen to step forward and actually pitch their product or their idea at the end of the day. So they will actually stand up and do like a 3-minute presentation where they're pitching their idea to our Idea mentor judges. And then from that, our mentor judges will have an opportunity to ask them questions, and then they will select a few students from each of the age groups for the showcase pitches and the finale at the very end. And the winning teams will be awarded prizes. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the day, depending on when you can make it out or when you want to plan your opportunity to make it out. And then I have another quick video. This is a video. This gives you a sense of the showcase. This was from the Idea Summit. I think this was the 2018 version. So it'll give you a bit of a sense of what the day is going to look like. So as you can see, it's a big event, lots of different things going on. That kind of gives you a sense of all the different aspects. Kids are excited to come in off the buses. We've been working closely. Our transportation department has been fabulous in terms of providing all the buses for us to get the kids in and out over the course of the day and still meet all of their other needs. And the other things, we have other things that are happening throughout the event as students come in. There's like some Thinkology challenges and design challenges for the guests that are coming through. So there's a whole bunch of activities happening throughout the day. So it's a really great event, a great opportunity to showcase the entrepreneurship spirit that lives within our schools and the great work that our students are doing. That is then followed up by the Idea X Challenge. So the Idea X Challenge was born out of the Idea Summit. When we first had the Idea Summit, it's grades 4 to 8, so really elementary, middle. So the think tank that created Idea Summit said, what if we created something similar for our high school students? Can we kind of find something that will give them an opportunity to participate? And so that's where the Idea X Challenge was born, and we've completed it once in 2019. So again, like the summit, this is the first time since, so this will be our second Idea X Challenge. So we basically have teams from high schools. We have 9 teams from our high schools who have formed together in teams of anywhere from 3 to 6 students, and they are presented with a global or local issue to try and solve. And then they come up with a solution to that problem, and they then pitch their solution to a panel of judges for significant opportunities to win scholarship prizes. Again, using entrepreneurship, using the design thinking process. In our first Idea X Challenge, the one was the poster, Let's Change the World Together. The problem that they were faced was dealing with, providing a land or ocean-based solution to the global problem of single-use plastic. So that was the original challenge. This year's challenge is a little different. Teams were given the challenge to design an environmentally sustainable, friendly, Indigenous focused, with a focus on Indigenous perspectives, part of Langley. And it was left open, whether that was township, city, or whether they chose a region, but basically design a future Langley in 50 years that is meeting all of those criteria: environmentally friendly, community responsible, has Indigenous perspective. So that's the challenge that they've been placed in front of them. The teams have been working together since January. So we brought the teams together actually in this room in January. We gave them the challenge. and they have been working diligently over the last few months, getting ready for presenting their final solution on May the 23rd. The 9 teams will be at the Idea Summit, so you will get a chance to meet the teams. They will have their ideas there, so you'll get to see what they actually are coming up with. It's been a really interesting journey because they've all taken different approaches. I've been very fortunate. I've been part of the process all along the way. We have staff working with them, myself included, in terms of doing check-ins with them and doing like sort of practice presentations to get ready for this, because it's a pretty significant event for them to do that. And I'll give you the details on that one. And this, just a little bit of background. This is the team from 2019 that actually won. So they were a group of students from Walnut Grove. And what they came up with, their solution to the plastic problem was they actually came up with the idea of creating edible utensils to replace plastic utensils. And what was interesting is that many of them have a background, their families were from Asia. And one of the things they shared as part of their learning was that in Asia, many families, they were sharing, they use plastic utensils. They don't actually have utensils in their home. They all use plastic utensils. So for them, it was a real problem because they noticed in their countries that their families came from, how much waste was created from that. So they actually came up with the idea, what if we had edible utensils? And the interesting piece is, part of their project was that book there, Plastic Pete's Journey to Recycling, which was their story around that. And from that winning team, that book has now actually become a book that you can actually purchase on Amazon. And so the book, the 3 students didn't actually do that piece. Another group of students who they were a different team actually took the idea because they didn't want to like take the book and actually put it into publishing, and they've actually put it. So you can actually go on to Amazon and purchase that book, which is their story, which came out of their project. So really cool sort of what these types of things are doing for our students as they're doing that. That group was also had a feature on CTV News, which lives on our website as well. So that was really cool just to see the types of things that are available to them. And the winning teams, there is up to approximately as much as $20,000 in scholarships that could be awarded to the teams that come up with the best ideas. And that is a huge thanks to the Langley School District Foundation and the work of our director there, who's here in a different role tonight. But that's been fabulous to have all that. So we will be awarding prizes at the end of the night. And again, everybody in the room and our trustees are invited to that as well. So that'll be on May the 23rd in the banquet room at the Langley Events Center. And so those students will be giving their final presentations. They have 8 minutes to present their solution to fixing Langley, the future of Langley in 50 years. And I'm going to tell you that 8 minutes is not very long for them to do that. So if you get a chance to come out, and we have 5 fabulous judges who are going to make decisions about the winning team. So Idea, oops, I see Tanya's taking a picture. Idea Summit and Idea X. Hopefully that gives you a sense. We're really excited to have them back. Great events. We hope to see all of you out. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Trustee Wilson.
So, oh, there it goes. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm always just amazed by this when I go and watch it. It's just mind blowing. I advise anybody to get out if you can. It's so exciting and great. I was glad to see we're teaching the 15-minute coffee break, which is recess when you're younger, and that's important for kids to know. I just want to know, how do we choose, like we're going to look at Langley, making Langley better for 50 years from now. How do you choose the idea? Like, yeah.
Choose the winners, you mean? Like who? Oh, the concept? Sandra Averill, who is our, she's in my department, district teacher of ADST and technology. She is the one that comes up with the ideas. The original one was her and Don Tomlinson, who was in my role. So that one, actually, the one that you see that we're doing this year, we actually were planning to do it in 2020, because we were actually planning to do the Idea Summit and Idea X, and then of course COVID hit. So we had already started We had it already, and so we were able to carry that forward. So at the end of this round, then Sandra and I will sit down and come up with another one. So she's sort of the expert around design thinking and problem solving. And one of the things I forgot to mention, the Idea X, there's actually a real Idea X competition. I don't know if people know that, but it actually has existed for many years. And you can, like, there's millions of dollars of prizes for it. So that's actually where the idea came from. And so kind of using some of the things we've seen through there in terms of coming up with our own solutions for it. Yeah.
Trustee Ward, did you say that you wanted to speak or no? Oh, I thought you did. I thought you did, so it's okay if you don't. Okay.
Quite nice, but I have spoken about this before, but I just think the real innovation is what the Langley School District is doing with respect to entrepreneurship. So I just commend you and staff as we support this, because everybody understands careers. We go to school to get a good job, but that was being the traditional educational process for a long time, and it's nice to support this other aspect, which is an essential element of society, so which is entrepreneurship. So I just want to commend you and thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Thank you so much for coming in and doing this wonderful presentation. I kept catching myself smiling as I was watching the slides and the videos. So I'm super excited to be there this year and see all the wonderful ideas coming forward. So thank you. Okay. So trustees, we have, do I have a mover that the Board of Education receives the report on the 2023 Idea Summit and IDX Challenge for information as presented? Moved by Trustee Wilson, seconded by Trustee Rye. Any discussion on the motion? No. All those in favor? Opposed? I'm in favor. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the school calendars 2023, 2024. Is this yourself, Assistant Superintendent? Deputy.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I'm standing beside Kevin Reeve, our District Principal of Human Resources. And before Kevin gets into the presentation tonight, I just want to take a moment to thank the partner groups and Kevin for their work together through the school calendar and conversations that we've had around it. One of the things that we stand in Langley on is the importance of community and the importance of working together. And through this process of developing the calendar for the school calendars for 23-24, it's been a great experience to just sit down and have conversations with each of the different partner groups about how we make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students, our staff, and our community in placing different dates and different events throughout the year. So I just want to commend both Kevin and appreciate the work we've done together as a group to make this a successful process. And Kevin's going to share with you tonight in terms of where we landed with the school calendars for 23-24. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So for the school calendars for 2023-2024, looking at the background, Langley School District continues to work with an open heart and an open mind to increase alignment between school calendars while respecting unique school community needs and working with our stakeholders. Deputy Superintendent Branford has talked about how we collaborated with all of our different partner groups. They're all here tonight and all had input into these calendars, which was really nice moving forward, because this is all of us working together. These are our students, and being able to provide opportunities for them that work not only for schools, but for staff and for students and for families. The Langley School District utilizes a 2-week spring break by adding calendar variation days. These are classes that are not in session. And another part of the background is input has been gathered, like I said, by all our partner groups, administrators, along with our community, staff, feedback, and information from previous calendar consultations, which we'll go into a little bit more in a bit. To elaborate more on the 2-week spring break, the 2-week spring break goes back many years. It goes back 12 years, I believe now, and extra time is added, approximately 10 minutes per day on all other instructional days to accumulate 5 days worth of time over the school year. This time is applied to the winter break 1 day before winter break. This year, our winter break doesn't start until December 22nd. We will have December 22nd off, which is a Friday, and then we'll have a 2-week spring break, which also includes Easter. The additional week of spring break only affects instructional time at schools, and school board office staff, maintenance staff, IT staff, and all other 12 months employees are not affected. CUPE 1260 and the district have in the past balanced the extra week of spring break with calendar variation agreement for some school-based support employees. The total number of days in the school year is going to be for next year consistent with this year as at 187 days in the calendar. Of those 187 days, 180 are instructional, students are in session, and 7 non-instructional days, 3 professional days, 1 administrative day, 2 report card preparation and design assessment days, and 1 school improvement day. The calendar looking forward also to 2024, 25, and 25, 26, we will be consistent at 187 days over those years as well. Please note, there's a few notes that we will look at as we look at each of the 8 calendars. There are 8 separate calendars, separate elementary school calendars for schools with parent-teacher interviews and those with student-inclusive conferences. Our initiative to have our elementary schools, an 8th calendar was added this year to accommodate 12 elementary schools who are reporting to parents utilizing student-inclusive conferences, and the goal is to have all 31 elementary schools using student inclusive conferences for the 24-25 school year. A second note, the switch in the May Prody for RC Garnet Elementary. This allows RC Garnet staff to have professional day on May 10th and allows the school to be open on May 17th to share their practice when the rest of the district has professional development day. Our third note, Langley Education Center has a separate calendar as their staff work 4 days a week, so their non-instructional days are different from other schools. There are no significant changes to the LEC calendar for the 23-24 calendar for the current year. And Vanguard has a separate calendar as they operate on a quarter system. And Simons UConnect has a separate calendar as they operate 2 schools within 2 separate calendars at that one site. The calendars to be reviewed are the elementary student inclusive conferences, elementary and middle calendar where they have parent-teacher conferences, secondary semester schools, Langley Fine Arts School, Langley Fundamental Middle Secondary School, Langley Education Center, Simons and UConnect, Vanguard Secondary School. And here's an example of the elementary and middle. Some of the dates that cannot be moved are the start of the school year and the end of the school year, as those are calendar regulation. Our spring break, we have aligned with other districts and had consultation with other districts as well, that in our neighboring districts, as well as our professional development days. We have our one in September, our one in October is a provincial, and we have used our school improvement day in October and worked with our employee groups and schools and moved it to October where it's normally in September in order to make sure we don't have anything planned in and around the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, and making sure that we're honoring that day within the schools. Calendar compliance, all school calendars have been checked to make sure that they comply with all relevant school calendar regulations, and all calendars meet the minimum hours of instruction for the year of 2023-2024. And the school days have been adjusted with the LTA agreement to meet the required hours of instruction at each grade level. Kindergarten, 853 hours, 1 to 7, 878, and 8 to 12, 952. At this time, recommended board motion that the Board of Education approves the school calendars for the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a mover for the motion that the Board of Education approves the school calendars for the 2023-2024 school year as presented? Moved by trustee Rye, seconded by trustee Neufeld. Any discussion on the motion? Trustee Wilson?
May 10th. Was that for this May, like 2023 or? Okay. I didn't look ahead that far because this year it falls on a Wednesday and I thought that was a strange day to choose, but.
Yes, sorry, yes, we're not this school year, following school year.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Also, when we talked about the feedback, and I saw some feedback in the report, it was mainly parent feedback, and you've gone over that you worked with the partner groups. Was there anything in the partner group meetings that was a hurdle that was harder to overcome, or anything that?
Great discussion. Actually, on where to place our professional development, our design and assessment days, really looking at a balance between Mondays and Fridays in order to give employees and schools that some have a Friday off, like Langley Education Center. Simons U Connect have different staff in session Monday to Wednesday versus Wednesday to Thursday. So we had those discussions. We're able to come to really good consensus as to where to place these days that would be best for students, first of all, staff, and then schools and their communities.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Seeing none, I will call the vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Kevin, back to you.
Okay, thank you. We are also looking ahead, as the district has committed to putting out 3 years in advance calendars in order to help schools and families plan for long range plans as they move forward with their lives. The district calendar for 25-26. The calendar that will be presented is in compliance with relevant school calendar regulations. And like I said before, this calendar for 25-26 will have the same number of instructional days as the 2023-2024, with the same number of hours for kindergarten, grades 1 to 7, and grades 8 to 12. The proposed district calendar only date. This is the important is the proposed district calendar only details instructional days, non-instructional days, and statutory holidays and vacations. The consultation process on this proposed calendar started on February 22nd and concluded on March 23rd, 2023. This is in compliance with calendar regulations. With this calendar here, here is where the dates have been placed for the 25-26 school year. You notice our start date, which is a provincial regulation, is September 1st, and all statutory holidays are in red or orange for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation to distinguish that one. We have a 2-week spring break. You will see where Christmas is located, and then our school end in 25-26 would be June 26, based on our contract with the Langley Teachers Association. And the recommended board motion that the Board of Education approves the district calendar for 25-26 as presented.
Thank you. Could I please have a mover for the motion that the Board of Education approves the district calendar for 2025 to 2026 as presented? Trustee Rye, Trustee Neufeld, second. Any discussion on the motion? No. Okay, hearing no discussion on the motion, call the motion for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along to Secretary Treasurer's reports. Moving to 8.1 Annual Facilities Grant 2023 to 2024. I'll pass this over to you, Secretary Treasurer Isley.
Thank you, Chair Ashdown. For trustees, we annually have funding that is provided to us from the ministry called the Annual Facilities Grant. It's one of the major funds that we use for the repair and upkeep of our facilities across the district. The Annual Facilities Grant is one of those abnormal timing ones. We follow the ministry year for our Annual Facilities Grant. So it goes from April 1st to March 31st. So the 23-24 plan, which is before you tonight, technically started beginning of this month and goes to the end of March next year in 24. It's comprised of two funding sources by the ministry. They have an operating portion that they fund out of their operating funds of $680,306 and a capital portion for $3,579,119 for a total of $4,588,425. Like to point out that this is the first time in many years that the Annual Facilities Grant has changed and has been increased by the ministry. Last year, we were just under $3.5 million. So it's been a sizable increase to the AFG for the districts. Obviously, this is a welcome news for districts, as the Annual Facility Grant is never enough, obviously, to deal with all the requirements that we have on the facilities that we have to maintain. As in years past, of that total funding we receive, there's a small piece, just less than $58,000, that is used for what they call CAMS, which is a system that they use to maintain all the reporting for that. So that leaves us a net balance of just over $4.2 million. The plan is in your package tonight. That is done by staff that prioritize the needs across the district to put that plan together. Looking for approval tonight because we can't access funds until we approve that and submit that into the ministry, which staff is hoping to do shortly. With that, I'll hand it back to you, the chair.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a mover of the recommended motion that the Board of Education approves the Annual Facilities Grant 2023 to 2024 spending plan as presented? Trustee Neufeld, seconded by Trustee Wilson. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Trustee Ward.
Through the chair to the Secretary Treasurer, there's about 60 to 100 items here. Can you go through them one by one and speak to it? No, it is pretty comprehensive. I think what impresses me is when I'm looking at gym resurfacing and all these things like these. Some of these things have been in the works for a long time. It's nice to see them getting done because we have 45 different sites. So we have a good team that's leading the way in making sure that we tie up loose ends. So thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? No? Okay, as I don't see any speakers, I will call a vote on the motion. Can I have a show of hands, please, for all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Next on the agenda is the annual 5-year capital plan bylaw, 2023 to 2024. Can I pass this back over to you, Superintendent, Secretary Treasurer Isley?
Thank you. Trustees will recall that every year we put in a 5-year capital plan to the ministry as part of the work done by the board and staff for the needs on the larger capital projects across the district. That is followed up every year with what they call the ministry response letter, which comes in the middle of March, which basically tells districts what projects have either been approved to start or have been advanced to a next stage in the process. So the district has received theirs and wanted to go through that to you tonight. And there's a bylaw that is required so that we can submit that bylaw to the ministry once again, so that we can start accessing funding on these projects that have been approved. So the big one for us is that the district was approved to move to a business case for a new secondary on the Willoughby Slope. That's the first step in us in getting approval to build a school. So we are in the process of doing that business case called the project definition report. So that'll be worked on over the next little while. And then once that is approved by the Ministry and Treasury Board, there's usually an announcement then on the funding of a school. So it's the first step in the process, which for a school that is desperately needed up on the Willoughby Slope. On what they call the minor capital, there were a couple items that were approved for Aldergrove Secondary. There's two different funding sources, but for the same project. Just so that we could do that. That would be for phase 1. Similar projects were done at Brookswood, Poppy, and Peter Ewart. So this would be a replacement of the windows and some work on the exterior, and was done under the school enhancement project for $1.1 million and the carbon neutral capital program of $400,000. We were also approved for one wheelchair accessible bus for just over $190,000. So those are the ones that are in your package that we need the bylaw for, so that we can start drawing those funds and start those projects. In the response letter, they did acknowledge that there are 2 projects that were previously sent to the project definition stage and have acknowledged that the district has submitted both of these. The business cases have been completed and are sitting with the ministry and trying to get through Treasury Board approval, that being a new elementary for Northeast Latimer and a expansion to Langley Secondary. So we're hoping to hear back on those very soon, as we would like to get started on those 2 projects. So with that, I will hand it back and answer any questions.
Thank you. We have a recommended motion that the school district number 35, Langley, capital plan 2023-2024, capital bylaw number 2023-24, CPSD 35-01 be given first reading. Do I have a mover to that motion? Trustee Wilson, do I have a seconder? Trustee Rye, any discussion on the motion? Discussion? All right, I will call the motion to a vote then. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favor, please? Opposed? Okay, carried unanimously. Next motion, recommended motion is that the school district, sorry, this is really good. That the school district number 35 Langley capital plan 2023-2024, capital bylaw number 2324, CPSD 35-01 be given second reading. Do I have a mover to that motion? Trustee Neufeld motion made the motion, seconded by Trustee Ward. Can I have a show of hands? Oh, sorry, discussion on the motion? No discussion. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, carried unanimously. Okay. Next motion, recommended, unanimous, okay. Next motion, recommended motion before the board is that the school district number 35 Langley capital plan 2023 to 2024, capital bylaw number 2023 to 24, CPSD 35-01 be given third reading, passed and adopted on this 25th day of April 2023. Sorry.
You missed one.
My apologies, I skipped over one. Okay, before we do that motion, we have another recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District number 35 Langley approves having all three readings of the capital plan 2023 to 2024, capital bylaw number 2023-24, CPSD 35-01 at tonight's meeting. Do I have a mover to that motion? Trustee Ward, do I have a seconder? Trustee Neufeld, any discussion on the motion? Yep. Okay, Trustee Neufeld.
Before we vote this all the way through, can you just give kind of a rough timeline on the secondary school and kind of what the capacity is looking like?
The ministry is kind of targeted 2028, but we won't know that until we get the business case done and approved before, because that dictates timeline, obviously. Yeah. District staff are doing everything we can to bring that timeline much closer. Yeah. Right now, the plan is for a capacity of about 1,900 students.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing no more discussion, I will call the motion to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Okay, carried unanimously. Next motion, the final motion on this is that it recommended is that the school district number 35 Langley, capital plan 2023-2024, capital bylaw number 2023-24, CPSD 35-01 be given third reading, passed and adopted on this 25th day of April 2023. Do I have a mover to this motion? Trustee Ward, do I have a seconder? Trustee Rye, any discussion on the motion? No. Okay, seeing no discussion on the motion, I will call the motion to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed, please raise your hands. Carried unanimously. Here. Okay, next on our agenda is 8.3 student transportation walk limits. I believe Secretary Treasurer, you're taking this.
Thank you, Chair. At the board meeting last April, there was a motion passed by the board to look into the walk limits and reducing those for the various age categories. So staff have now come back with that work, and the package has that report in it. Due to the work and the scope of the project, staff brought in a consultant to assist with that project at a cost of $60,000 to do that. The consultant was recommended to us by the firm that we do the software with for our busing software. Also, you can see the team of staff that have worked with them over the last year to get the information and put that together. And I'll speak a little bit more about some of that work as we go through the presentation. So those changes that were proposed for elementary and middle, it was a reduction from 3.2 kilometers to 3 kilometers, and for secondary schools from 4.8 to 4 kilometers. So what that meant was basically every school had to have the boundaries redrawn around the walk limits for each of those schools. So I had to map all the roads and the walkways for that. And this is kind of a bit of a graphic representation of the changes. You can see the brown in the middle is what has been added into the walk limits, for an example of Peter Ewart and for DW Poppy. Once all those areas were redrawn and redefined, had to go through all the students that fell into those brown areas. Basically then once those were all identified, the existing riders, the new riders were then put into the bus software, and then new routes were basically rebuilt with all the people. So it was quite a process that to get to that point. We did assume that 100% of the people in that Brown area would take the bus, because for us, we wanted to define what the maximum was, but also for us to be able to figure out routes, we needed to know addresses, and it was almost impossible for us to figure out who would and who wouldn't be on a bus. So it kind of gave you the goalposts of what this could look like. As part of that process, like I mentioned, they rerouted all current routed students and added new eligible students to those routes, made sure that ride times were less than 45 minutes, made sure we maximize the capacity in the runs where possible. Obviously, there's some runs that had to be added, and not all of them are obviously 100% efficient. Tried to reduce double runs of buses for school if possible, and we tried to keep the morning and afternoon runs this together as much as possible. So what this resulted in was another 434 students being bused at an operating cost of just under $670,000 annual costs, with a loss of courtesy rider revenue every year about $12,400. The consultants figured to be able to do that would require 8 additional buses, as well as a recommendation for a spare bus due to maintenance, to make sure that we were always able to maintain those buses and those routes at all times. And they provided 3 options for busing based on the last year's procurement of pricing through buses and last year's rebates. So the estimates for an electric after rebates is $3.2 million. The consultant did acknowledge those are constantly changing, the rebates, so like those could change. For a propane, it would cost $2 million, and diesel just under $2 million. We did have conversations with the ministries about them funding buses. They are open to them being put into the capital plan that we submit, and would have to wait next year to find out. They did not commit obviously to funding those buses or the ability to fund all of them in 1 year. We usually get 1, maybe 2 buses a year funded. So the likelihood of us being funded 8 buses in 1 year, they didn't give us a lot of optimism that that would be something that would be able to happen. So that is part of the consideration that has to be made, that the district would most likely be responsible for purchasing buses as a one-time upfront cost. They would then be eligible, obviously, for the refresh rate over time and be put into the capital plan as we go forward. So they did mention a couple other considerations as they were going through the process that they mentioned in their reports that they saw as potential things that need to be investigated or potential issues. Obviously, parking of the buses and staff. One that they highlighted was that there isn't enough garage space to add another 8 or 9 buses to the system. So that would require us figuring out how we would do that, where we would do that, and the tooling for that. The maintenance yard where all the buses is already maxed for the electric infrastructure for electric. So if that was a way to go, the infrastructure would have to be upgraded for charging. And one that staff raised was concerns about availability of drivers due to the bus shortage that is ongoing in the Lower Mainland and pretty much across Canada. Just the ability to even just maintain runs has been a challenge for a lot of people this year. So there's a lot of information in your package, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions before we go ahead with the recommended motion on this? Trustee Wilson?
Yeah, mine's not so much a question because we did have this brought to us thankfully earlier, just so we were a little bit aware of what the report came back with. And I do understand that we looked at 100% ridership, and I guess, to be diligent, we needed to do that. But of currently, we do have less than 50% of riders who are eligible that access the busing, so we may only need 4 buses. We wouldn't know that, like you said, until we did that and had to figure out the challenges then. And what I see is, you know, I don't see a big appetite for many people to want to continue down this road, I don't think. So what I do know though is that transportation is a barrier for so many of our students. And I feel like we need to think of, you know, innovative ways that we can help some of those students access transportation to school, and whether it not be through this conventional model, I think that we need to spend some time as trustees, whether on our own or in a group over the next term, just trying to decide on, you know, some form or some way that we can help students remove that barrier to education. So that's all I really wanted to say on the report at this time. Thank you for all the work that everybody did, and I appreciate that. I appreciate finally knowing some figures and numbers that go along with how many students there are that this would affect. So thank you to staff.
Do I have a mover on the, I'm assuming no one's put up their hand, they had any more questions. Do I have a mover on the recommended motion that the Board of Education receives the information on the student transportation walk limit study for information as presented? Trustee Neufeld, do I have a seconder? Trustee Ward? Okay, and any questions on the motion or? No? Okay. I just quickly wanted to mention that this was a decision of the last board to go ahead with this study, and I myself personally I was, not to say that I wouldn't like to offer more extended walk or less walk limits and to extend our busing to more students, but we simply just don't have the funds, of course, to do it at this time. And so I was a little surprised, to be honest, or quite surprised at the cost of the study, and that now we have $60,000 that isn't going into classrooms, and instead it went into the study where we didn't have any extra money to start with really to do anything with it. So I don't believe it was really the best use of money at the time. Not to say that I don't wish that we could offer more busing, because I absolutely agree with Trustee Wilson that there's definitely barriers often for students. And so, but just my personal feeling, I was a little bit shocked at the cost of it, and that we've lost that $60,000 now in the study. So anyways, any other discussion on the motion though? Trustee Ward?
Thank you, through the chair. I think this is actually our job as trustees, so I appreciate both trustees' input here. This was brought up by the previous board, and we had some robust discussion at that time. I anticipated myself that this was going to be quite a lengthy project, which is why we voted to push it a full year, and we had, with the staff involvement and a lot of cost. But the good thing is it's going to give us it gives us a reading for future boards to kind of be able to kind of get the pulse of, and to educate the public that when you move the dials one little bit, it has a significant impact on the overall district. So, and since we've got so much input from the public, called pressure, and everybody wants to be well served by our district, it's important that our whole community at large understands that what we're doing in a governance role is, it's a matter of a bunch of knobs and dials, and when you affect one, it obviously affects the other. And we're here to improve educational outcomes for students, and that's our primary role. So we don't take it lightly that this element, when it comes to transportation, is not always going to meet the needs of each and every single family and child. So it's a tough one. I understand. I appreciate your sentiment, and I felt kind of the same way. But I do appreciate the fact that it's given us a guide, and I thank Trustee Wilson for advancing it in the first place. So I think it is one of those things. It did cost us 60 grand. That's kind of a hit, but I think it will serve us well in the future, just so that the public knows and we can defer to it in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, trustee Ward. Any other discussion on the motion? No? Okay. I'd like to call a vote then on the motion before us. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed, please raise your hands. No. Carried unanimously. Moving along to policy committee and 9.1, notice of motion and return, policy 8, board committees. Can I pass this over to you, Secretary Treasurer, to speak on this?
Sure. At the January public board meeting, based on a recommendation from the policy committee with the changes in your package, the board recommended a motion to put it up for notice of motion back to this meeting to adopt the changes. Staff received no feedback on the notice of motion.
Thank you. All right, I have a recommended motion that the Board of Education approves policy 8, board committees as presented. Do I have a mover to this motion? Trustee Wilson, seconder. Trustee Neufeld. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion on the motion, I'll call the motion to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, next on our agenda 9.2, notice of motion return is policy 18 on student transportation. I'll pass this back over to you, Secretary Treasurer Isley.
Yeah, at the same meeting, there was the same recommendation and process for policy 18 student transportation, and also for this one, no feedback was received.
Thank you. Can I please have a mover on the recommended motion that the Board of Education approves policy 18 student transportation as presented? I'm losing my spot. Trustee Rye, do I have a seconder? Trustee Neufeld. Any discussion on the motion? Trustee Wilson.
Yes, I did point out before it went for notice of motion that I felt that there was some issues with the way the wording change has gone. And in this time, while it's been out, I've relooked at the motion. I know I've asked for clarification and attended a policy meeting where it was discussed, but I just cannot vote in favor of the recommended changes because I feel like by replacing the current 1.1.3, we are no longer including students whose physical disabilities limit their ability to walk long distances, but are otherwise fully independent. So these students are no longer recognized in the new 1.1.3 language.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson. Any other discussion on the motion? Trustee Ward.
I just appreciate Trustee Wilson's comments, and we've had some robust discussion and as it relates to the impact of any language change. But again, it's not done lightly. This would be a question through the chair to Secretary Treasurer, or is this something that we could entertain any amendment, or the way that this is, because I'm new to the policy committee and understanding how this kind of works, but is there any amendment that's seen in this, that because or was Trustee Wilson just wanting to make a reflection?
Secretary Treasurer or Superintendent Gill, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, this motion has gone back and forth to policy a couple of times, and the language that's been actually taken out was taken out under the guidance of our Director of Instruction and Learning Support, Michael Morgan, and is not designed to be exclusive and not designed to exclude those students that were indicated by Trustee Wilson. That question was asked specifically at that meeting. I think you were at that meeting as well, because there was a concern at the time. We wanted to make sure we didn't miss that. I think during the original, when we first brought this policy up, I think it was a recommendation from policy to actually combine those two items into one line, because just in the interest of not having repetition as well.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the motion? No discussion? All right, I will call the motion then to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Trustee Wilson opposed? Motion is carried. Next on our agenda is 9.3, Policy 17, Accumulated Operating Surplus. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education serves notice of motion to the district's education community and its education partner groups that it intends to adopt the revisions to policy number 17, accumulated operating surplus, at the June 20th, 2023 regular board meeting. Just a quick note on that motion that the agenda posted online, the date was incorrectly posted as April 25th, but it's actually, the recommended motion is June 20th, 2023. Do I have a mover to this motion? Trustee Rye? Do I have a seconder? Trustee Neufeld? Any discussion on the motion? Okay, saying, oh, actually, were you going to speak to this? I didn't ask you, but no, if we don't need to, it seems like everybody's okay. Okay, so we'll seeing no more discussion on the motion, we'll call it to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed, please raise your hands. Carried unanimously. All right, we've reached close to the end of our meeting with new business. We don't have any new business at this time added. Is there any new business to add? Anyone would like to add to our agenda? No new business? All right. Okay, next on our agenda is trustee comments. Maybe I'll start at my far right with Trustee Wilson. Do you have any comments?
Great. I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight and for our delegation that we had earlier. And I hope that people will be able to spend time on April 28th recognizing the day of mourning for workers killed and injured. My hope is that one day we won't need to add any new names to the list of workers who died merely from doing their job. So please get out and take a moment to recognize that. We all need to do our part in making workplaces safe. So thank you for everybody for attending or watching online, and have a great night.
Trustee Neufeld?
Yeah, just glad to hear about the secondary school in Willoughby's moving forward. Even though it may take a little bit of time, it's better than not being there at all. So just grateful for yourself and staff that are doing all the work behind it.
Trustee Rye? Trustee Ward? All right, and I don't have any comments to make other than thank you so much for coming, everybody. It's nice to be back. I missed the last meeting because I was off for surgery, so it's good to be back. So moving along in our agenda now to question period. Question period is provided at board meetings. The purpose is to ensure that those present in the audience have an opportunity to obtain clarification concerning business conducted during that meeting. Priority will be given to responding to one question per person before considering further questions from any individual. The following will help the public develop questions for question period at a board meeting that is keeping with the goal of a respectful and focused meeting. Questions need to be directed to the chair and not to staff, need to be related directly to the topic on the agenda, need to be succinct, focused, and not be a statement, may not be asked that are related to personnel or directed at an individual trustee, may not be asked that are related to contract negotiations, and the questioners shall provide their name so that it can be reflected in the minutes. All of the above are directions provided for in board policy number 7, board operations. The chair may answer, may defer to staff, or indicate a question may not be in keeping with the above guidelines. The board appreciates the public's interest and wants to ensure a professional meeting is conducted with question period focused on providing guests with the clarification they seek. Trustees also welcome questions from members of the public apart from question period. Their contact information is available on the school district website. Hey. Good evening, Suzanne. Go ahead.
Suzanne Pearl. Thank you all for a great meeting tonight, and thank you for the important pause at the beginning of the meeting to acknowledge our babies that have been found. My question to the chair is in respect to transportation and walk limits. I want to thank firstly the district for taking the time to do this important research, because it is important and it's not time or money lost. It's an investment, as Trustee Ward has indicated, for future evaluation at the very best for our students. And anytime we invest in our students, we're supporting our children's well-being and therefore community. When I'm looking and listening to what we discussed tonight and reflecting back on last term, there's looking at in the policy 18 section 1.1.4, it reads students with special needs are placed in a district program other than the student's home school, which is talking about priority granted for the students. My question to the chair, as it relates to this subsection and the policy motion that has the framework for which students will have priority. The language feels restrictive for students with intellectual disabilities, specifically those with learning difficulties, with executive functioning, delayed processing, and when they're living within the walk limits, that can still become a dangerous expedition for them, because our children tend to wander in their mind who have these types of diagnoses and neurologies, and having that extra support, as Trustee Wilson noted, or the lack thereof, does create a barrier to safe education, access to safe education, especially for families who are not in a position of privilege to drive their students to school. What I'm trying to understand within this policy is the language about placed in a district program other than a student's home school. At which point can our families anticipate support for their students as a priority learner? How do they access it? That moves outside of that when they're living inside the walk limits, so that they can have support and access to their education safely.
Thank you for the question, Suzanne. We're actually quite pleased with we have staff that work well with our families, with our resource teachers, and if there are concerns around safety, they could connect with our district staff, either Michael Morgan or any of the two district principals, to determine whether that family would require busing or that student would require busing. And that's the way that they would go about connecting. And as you would know, that there are meetings with the resource teachers regularly, and resource teachers do reach out, and they are the ones that would initiate that conversation.
Thank you. May I redirect a question?
Thank you.
Trustee.
It looks like there's no other questions at this time, so I can pass it back to you to ask another question.
Thank you. Is this something we can highlight to the attention of our parents, maybe through our DPAC meetings, whatnot, so that our parents know that there's opportunities for conversation to move forward on access to that type of support through support services to ensure that that accessibility is present?
Back to you.
Certainly.
Thank you, sir.
Heather, please state your name and.
My name is Turner. I live up in the Willoughby area, and most of you will know I ran my campaign. I was running for trustee, motivated by my grandchildren. And so I want to link my question today to the 5-year plan and attending the committee meetings and talking about the Willoughby slope. And Secretary Treasurer, you mentioned it was 2028 is kind of the final date, which is a long way off, and it may change from there. I understand that you mentioned that. Within the 5-year plan, 2023 to 2028 now is 5 years, and I'm under the impression that that was in the 5-year plan earlier. So that 5-year plan is, we may be 7 years out from when that started to then. My question isn't really about that. It's really about my grandchildren who live in Willoughby, who are looking to possibly be entering the elementary schools and the elementary school crisis that we probably have up in the Willoughby area with the continued development that's going on there. So we're in the Richard Bullpit area, and I think the capacity in there is 525 plus the portables that are there. I think we've exceeded that limit. And the question is, within a 5-year plan, how are we going to address, I think the numbers were 1,000 possibly increased for next year, not just in that area, obviously across the school district. But in the next few years, how are we going to deal with the crisis that's up in the Willoughby area with children, my grandchildren, entering the school system at that point? I'll just add to that, obviously, we've got a crisis with teachers, with, I believe, TTOCs. We've got a problem with not having enough of those and teachers and so forth. So I'm looking for some encouragement on the challenge that you guys have as a board coming forward, that in the next few years that we're going to see some hope for my grandkids and entering the school system.
Pass this over to you, Secretary Treasurer Isley.
So the 5-year capital plan, yeah, and you're correct, the secondary school's been in the 5-year capital plan for a number of years. Unfortunately, the district cannot build buildings without ministry approval and ministry funding. So I share your concern as to where we're going to be putting students and the ability to do that over the next couple of years. It's discussions that I have with ministry staff. Superintendent and I have had that with the Minister of Education, who came and visited the Willoughby slope during spring break. We took her on a tour through to Willoughby and showed her kind of what we're up against to give her a better idea of the needs in that particular area. And I think she left with a very good understanding of how urgent the situation is. We do have an elementary school that's sitting with Treasury Board that I hope will be approved soon, so that we can start working on that project. We are still hoping for September 25 for that elementary school. It's getting incredibly tight, but we will do everything in our power once we get approval to do that. Unfortunately, right now the solution is portables, and even that's getting more and more difficult as we're ordering portables well in a year in advance, and in the 15 to plus range per year right now that we're ordering portables, which the district has to figure out how to pay for. So I share your concern as to, and I wish I could reassure you as to how we're going to be able to do that over the next 5 years. But it's something I've said along. It's a problem that this district can't solve, and we require the ministry to help us.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, I believe I can speak on behalf of the board that we're also concerned and doing everything that we can to reach out to our MLAs and work with our province to do what we can. So definitely doing everything we can.
Could you, Superintendent, would you mind answering the teacher crisis as well? I think they're coupled together. I know it's a challenge for you guys, but I think it's, for me, it's hope for the near future because it's getting closer and closer.
Yeah, we continue to work in ensuring that we have teachers, and again, I prefer not to say crisis, but certainly we're getting better at filling all of our vacancies as far as TTOCs are concerned. We have been very close at the beginning of the year to have all of our positions at the beginning of the year filled, so all of our positions that are regular positions within schools. enrolling positions, sorry, are filled. So you're right. We still struggle with resource teachers. They're open postings, and we continue to work with our union partners to ensure that there's different ways that we can maintain caseloads for our students. Trying to do everything we can to make connections with our universities, trying to do everything we can to liaise with folks that are retiring in hopes to get them back to put in a couple more years. Certainly those are conversations we continue to have through phone, just calling people and asking them to come back as well. So we're continuing to do everything we can. We've ran a pilot with unqualified TTOCs, just 10 to start, to see what that would be like. And I know in visiting many of those unqualified TTOCs that many of them are actually planning on taking their degrees, and so making the connection early with them, and as they go on and get their teaching degrees, being able to have them come back. We are trying to go not just province-wide but beyond to ensure we have teachers in the classroom, and will continue to be a priority. And as we move into our strategic plan, it is certainly a big part of the work that we're doing over the next 4 years within our strategic plan as well.
Ask one more question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions with our guests or staff or no? Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, there was mention to the portables, and I can appreciate the challenge you have with that. And again, in the Willoughby area, my understanding is Richard Bulpit now is at their maximum on the site without, so that would be my catchment school that my grandkids would go to. If there's no room there, is there some innovative plan? Is there some options with regards to getting more portables in that site? Or are we going to be looking at having my grandkids go to other schools outside of their catchment area?
Can you speak to that?
Yep. So unfortunately, some kids are having to attend schools and will be outside their catchment area. For places like Richard Bulpit, we're having conversations with the township on getting variants for bylaws, so like putting on parking spaces or those kind of things. And we've also started conversations about potential of putting portables on the township parkland beside the school as a stopgap until we can open up a new school.
Which could be 7 to...
No, we're hoping to be opening an elementary school, like I said, in 2025. If we can get approval from the ministry shortly.
Is that the Latimer area, or is that?
That's Northeast Latimer, yes.
So that's not in the Willoughby where all.
No, but it shifts a lot of the kids that have been moving in between catchments.
Thank you. Appreciate your hard work.
Over to you, Superintendent Gill.
Just in addition to that, Neil, the other thing that we may be looking at into the future is boundary changes as well, to help balance our numbers within the Willoughby slope and in other catchments, because we do have some schools that have space and others that, like Richard Bulpit, that don't have any space. So that might be something that we need to look at in the new year.
Thank you. All right. Do I have a mover to adjourn the meeting at 8:45 p.m. Trustee Wilson, seconded by Trustee Neufeld. Okay, I'm assuming no discussion. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Have a good night, everyone.